The topic of today is the analysis and the reporting of long-term sound level measurements. So we are talking about visualizing recorded data, executing detailed analysis, or maybe even doing some post-processing on recorded data, and of course also to establish a report or documentation of your measurements. My name is Markus Becker. I'm here the technical director at NTI Audio, and sitting next to me is Paul Sinclair. He's our marketing specialist, and he is the one who is going to answer your question and assist me during the webinar. We have prepared the following topics for you. We will start with a short look at the motivation related to long-term noise level measurements or environmental monitoring. We will talk about briefly the data acquisition and the data import. Then we will present you in more extent the analysis tools that are available combined with a practical presentation. Summarize what we have seen, and in the end come to the question and answer, where I will hopefully be able to provide all the information that you need in addition. I expect the duration of the presentation in the range of about half an hour. So let's assume you have a customer who asks you to execute a noise measurement, a monitoring of street noise, for instance, to verify the exposure of a person who is living next to the street or whatever. Could also be monitoring industrial noise, machinery noise, or at an airport. There are different applications. The challenge is always to record over a long period of time, to record thousands or even more millions of data, and then to analyze them. So after having recorded these measurements, you go back to your office and then you want to take a look on what you have got. You want to analyze it. Maybe you want to filter out specific events that should be removed from the measurement for whatever reason. So there is a demand for visualizing and analyzing in more detail this bunch of data that you have recorded. Last but not least, your customer expects you to establish a report, a document, which summarizes your measurements and all the data, the relevant data that you have acquired. So the first step is the acquisition of the data and the import. We have already presented all the preparatory works in a separate webinar that was broadcasted a couple of weeks ago. You can also take a look at it at our website, but just to summarize it briefly, the most important steps is by working with the Excel tool, and this is our instrument of choice. Decide in which interval the data shall be logged. The minimum would be 100 milliseconds, can be 1 second, whatever. So the log interval is important. The measurements and the different weightings that you want to know. So you have to make this selection, what wideband levels shall be recorded. Optionally, you can add the spectra to the data recording and also the audio file recording. So that would allow you to listen to what has happened throughout the measurement if required. There's another option, the event trigger, that is also supported by the Excel tool, that would automatically create markers within the recorded data that point out that the recorded sound pressure level exceeded a specific threshold that you have defined in advance. Keep in mind, you can log an awful amount of data with the Excel tool. However, if you do that for a longer period of time, you may run out of memory. So bear that in mind when you select the wideband levels and the optional spectra and audio file. It might be advisable to restrict the amount of data just to make sure that you can cover the whole period of the monitoring. Having recorded everything, you have to transfer the data from the instrument to your PC, and you can do that either by connecting it to your PC with a USB cable or by just transferring the data via the SD card by plugging that into the corresponding slot of your PC. Keep in mind it is possible to import the raw data from the Excel2 also to an iMac computer. There are no restrictions of doing that. However, the PC software solutions that we're going to present to you in the next minutes, they only run on Windows computers. But still, once again, the raw data of the Excel2 are freely accessible in any case. They are formatted in files. They can be imported into spreadsheet programs, for instance. And second, what is also very important, when you copy that data, please make sure that you get all the test files that are related to a specific recording, or we call it a project, into the PC. And I want to show you that briefly. I have here the Windows Explorer, and you see here the content of my SD card in my Excel2. You see here there's a typical content list of this SD card. I open the projects folder, my projects, and now here you see there have been a lot of recordings sorted by date. For instance, here the 3 top files, they belong to each other, so they build together one project. You can see that here in the name, the 002, that is one recording. The next ones here is 001. It can be 3 files, it can be 5, can be 6 files, can be even a separate folder that goes into one project. So please, whenever you copy such data to your PC, make sure that you have all the corresponding files that are related to this recording, to this project, that all these files are copied to the hard disk of your PC. So what tools are available to analyze these data? You are, of course, free to establish your own data analysis. You have the file with all the data, and then you can import them. As I said, you can even program your own software. Pretty demanding, but you are free to do that. I just would like to show you briefly the content of such a log file. Here you see the technical information in the header regarding the instrument by which it has been recorded, the date, the time, and so on. And here now, that has been these data have been logged in an interval of 1 second. You see here the active measurements, the one that have been selected before the recording started. You see the corresponding results for each single step, for each single data acquisition. So these data are freely accessible, and you can program your own software if you want to analyze it in your specific way. However, as I said, this is pretty complex. So for that reason, we are offering 2 prepared solutions for you. The first one is a simple one, is the Microsoft Excel templates, formatted templates. They are available free of charge. You can download them from our website, and they are quite good in just displaying the recorded data in a limited way, I must admit, and creating simple reports. The limitations apply on the maximum number of points, the maximum number of samples you can visualize, and that is actually the maximum of 20,000. And you are also limited to just 2 curves that can be displayed at a time, and also the 100 millisecond data log interval, unfortunately, is not supported by the MS Excel spreadsheet solution. For that reason, we have recently, early March, we have launched a new software product. We call it the Excel2 Data Explorer. That's a very comprehensive, a very powerful tool to visualize the data, to edit them, to process them the way you want. You want to see both solutions, the Microsoft Excel templates and this Data Explorer, in a couple of minutes. Keep in mind, the Data Explorer needs to be licensed, or to be more precise, the data transfer from an Excel2 to the Data Explorer software. This transfer requires a license on the Excel2 instrument. As soon as this import procedure has been completed, you can copy and paste these imported data to as many PCs as you like. You can install the Data Explorer software on several PCs. You are absolutely free of doing that, exchanging the data from between different workplaces, but the initial import of the data needs a license on the Excel2 instrument. What are the typical tasks when you start analyzing your data? First of all, of course, you want to display the recorded level curves to see what has happened during that time. Then maybe you see some exceptional events, you want to identify them, maybe you want to classify them, possibly you want to exclude them from the overall calculation. Another task could be to look at the spectrum of specific events or points, measurement points in your recording, or to do a statistical analysis. There are also some legal requirements where you have to do a statistical analysis. So these are typical tasks for analyzing recorded sound pressure level data. So let's first take a look at the Microsoft Excel templates. To get such a template, you just need to register your Excel 2 under myNTIaudio.com. Then you may download these templates free of charge. There are different templates available. The one on top of this list, the noise or environmental monitoring, is the one we are talking about today. The other ones are more tailored for live event applications, but you are also free to use them if you need. And then, having downloaded them, you open them and you may adjust some settings. I'm going to show that to you right away. Here we have this noise report template. So I load my data from my hard disk to which I have imported it before. You see it takes a couple of seconds until all these data have been imported. So now I have here the front sheet. On the front sheet you see there is the start date and the end date of my measurement, the instrument, the microphone by which I have used it. You already see here the overall results of 2 curves, and then you have a couple of fields which you may edit manually if you like to customize your report if required according to your demands. You can add comments and whatever, the name of your client, the location where it has been recorded. So this is all editable. The next tab shows the chart, the recorded data over time. Up here is the overview chart. Down here is a zoom area. Now it's 1:1, but let me briefly filter out a certain section. Let's say we want to take a closer look at this event over here. So we can do that in different ways by limiting the time period that is displayed in this second in the large graph. So you see up here the shaded area, the gray one, is displayed in large scale down here. Second, you can also change the curves that are displayed. Of course, you can only display those curves that have been recorded, that are part of the log data. Just giving you an example here with the CP Max DT. So here you are free to choose the curves, 2 of them actually maximum, that you want to display. On the next tab we have the report. The report contains the end result of the displayed curves and some additional technical information, again the instrument with the serial number and the microphone that you have been using. And on the last tab here we see the log data. That's the same content as you have just seen before in my text file, in the raw data file. So now you could print out these forms, these documents, and use them as a report for your customer. Keep in mind the limitation, maximum 20,000 points, and the minimum log interval would be 1 second. We cannot go below that limit. So to overcome these limitations, you need the Data Explorer software, and this is of course also able to display the log data. Here you have the chance to even show more than just 2 curves. You have the chance to customize your analysis to it's much easier, much more comfortable to identify specific events, to classify them, differentiate them from other events. You can even exclude them if you like from the overall project result calculation. If you have recorded for instance, one event at two different locations with two different XL2 units. You can compare these results by opening the software twice on your PC. That's what we call parallel instances. And then you can visually compare these results. And last but not least, of course, edit the content of your report, or you can also export the numerical data and bitmaps. I'm going to show that to you just right now. This is the start screen of the Data Explorer. I'm gonna import now the same data file as I did before with the Excel spreadsheet, and you're gonna see it will be much quicker with the Data Explorer than with the Excel. It's already done here. It's available here. I open it. And now here you see a similar layout. You see up here is the overview chart with the whole recording, and down here is a magnified section. Here we see now all the curves that have been displayed. I can select the ones that I want to really see, so I'm free to limit that. So here I would have the same choice as I had with my Excel template, but as you have seen, I could even display a third over how many curves I want to see. Very important, the ability to zoom into specific sections. It's much more comfortable with the Data Explorer. I'm going to show that to you by placing my cursor over here and turning the scroll wheel of my mouse. I have a very quick, very immediate response and see what has happened in that section. You see up here, this yellow highlighted section is the one that I see down here. So this is a very comfortable tool to zoom and pan through the data, regardless how many data I have recorded. This is a very important point, by the way. The Data Explorer is able to handle millions of data points. There are no limitations. Let me briefly open another file, a default file that comes along with every installation. Its intention is that you can play a little bit around with it before you start your own measurements. So here you see, in addition to the level curves, we also have what we call the spectrogram. So these are the spectra that have been recorded during the monitoring. And you see on the right hand side the spectrum, the RTA spectrum. Let me briefly lock my cursor to this point here. So here you can see I can take a closer look at the spectrum of this time point of my recording. I can read out the frequency and the corresponding level of my cursor position within the spectrum. So this is an additional nice feature to get a better understanding of what has been happening, what kind of noise has been present during that measurement. Well, maybe you want to know what stands behind such a peak, what has happened here. So this is traffic noise, and maybe you have noticed also this blue bar that showed up here. This is actually the recorded audio file. Now let us listen briefly to what is happening here at this peak. Apparently that was the horn of a truck who drove by. Maybe we take a look at the next peak, see what's happening here. I hope you could hear that it was a helicopter. So let's assume again you are responsible for measuring the street noise. You want to exclude that helicopter from that street noise because it has nothing to do with the traffic actually. So here you have the chance by placing a marker. You just click on this icon here, and now you mark this area, and by selecting the corresponding marker type, this is now the exclude marker, you make sure that this section, the data within this section, are not considered for the overall calculation. So this is a very comfortable, very powerful feature where you can sort out those parts of the recording that you do not want to go into the overall project calculation. If you have a detailed, by the way, coming back to the cursor, if you want to know more detailed what is happening here, I'm going to just lock the cursor once again. You see up here, that is the readout, the numerical readout of the cursor at the corresponding position. You see here the timestamp and these two curves that I have recorded, what is the corresponding result. So let me briefly open a third file that comes also along with the installation of the Data Explorer. This is the same recording, absolutely the same recording as you have seen just before. And let's disable this. So these are the same curves again. The difference here is we have already prepared these markers for you. So there were trains passing by, horns. You see here the helicopter, some birds, bells, something else that happened that needs to be included. And you see now that there are different types of markers. Let us briefly look into here. This is a table of the marker types. I can edit the names. I can assign colors to different markers. I can decide which marker I want to use for which event. And I can decide which marker type shall be excluded from the overall project calculation by just ticking this checkbox here. So I could, for instance, decide that all horns shall be excluded too, if I like. Another analysis that you may want to execute is the statistical analysis. So we open this window here, and let's say we want to know the statistical distribution of the sound pressure levels over the whole project. We just let the system calculate this data. And you see here the statistical distribution of the sound pressure levels. You see on the right-hand side here the percentiles. You could even add another percentile calculation, for instance 99%. And you see immediately here the result down here. Or you could say, I only want to know the statistical calculation for the trained markers, for those sections which are labeled. So that would be the corresponding result. And of course, you can do that for all the different measurements that I have executed. So you're really free to statistically analyze your data according to your demands. Having done that, you may at any time change to the result view. Here you see the results in table format. You see the thick line here, that's the overall project result. You see up here those sections that are excluded from the calculation. You see here the small minus sign. Minus indicates that's excluded. So even this marker here, it has a different name, but the minus indicates these data within here are not going into the overall calculation, but you also see the individual data from within these marked areas. And down here are the marked areas that are just marked, just highlighted. They go into the overall calculation. Well, we are already at the point where we may want to protocol to create a document with this information. We can edit here the properties of our report file. We can edit the title of the report, the introductory test, the end test, and also the logo. So maybe I want to use another logo. So I just open that from my hard disk. You can use your own logo. You're absolutely free doing that. You confirm, and then you can have a preview of your report here. You see these 2 pages, your own logo, the customized title, the start and end time. They are, of course, fixed depending on when you were measuring. Introductory test, the printouts of the graphs, and hardware configuration, the table of the results, and the final text. If you, however, prefer to create your own report in a completely different format, completely different layout, you're also free to do that. You can export the data that you see here in the table into an Excel spreadsheet. And in addition, you may, by right-clicking here on a graph, copy the graph itself in bitmap format to the clipboard, and from there import it to your own personalized report. Well, that was the Data Explorer software. And just to summarize what you have seen, We have the three possibilities to analyze the raw data from the Excel tool. You can write your own software, pretty demanding, but on the other side, you're absolutely free to do whatever you want. You can use our Microsoft Excel templates for data visualization and documentation. Keep in mind the functional restrictions. However, they are free of charge. And last but not least, the Data Explorer software, a very powerful solution to importing huge amounts of data from an Excel tool, to visualize them, to listen to what has been happening, to visualize the spectra, to place markers, to edit them, to exclude them if you like, doing statistical analysis, and to document what you have done. Regardless which solution you choose, one recommendation from our side, please, before you start the recording, make up your mind what measurements do you really need. Do you want to have the spectra included? Do you want to have the audio file recorded? Which wideband levels do you really need? It is advisable to select only those measurements, only those results that you really need, just in order to save memory, not to run out of memory, and not to make the data analysis, the post-processing, too complex due to huge amounts of data which are not really necessary. So, well, we're at the end of the presentation. Let me briefly look whether there are some questions that have come in. Yeah, I see one question regarding the maximum possible recording duration. The answer is not very simple because this depends strongly, of course, on several parameters. One is the size, the memory size of the SD card you have plugged into your Excel tool. By default, we deliver the instruments with a 4 GB card. You can replace it by a larger memory card, so up to 32 GB are supported by the Excel tool. This is one parameter. Another one, of course, is the number of measurements you're going to record. So I would say, let's assume you have a logging interval of 1 second and you do the full recording of all measurements, all different time weightings, frequency weightings, spectra, audio file, linear audio file recording. Then the maximum recording duration would be in the range of 8 hours for a 4 GB memory card. But if you restrict yourself to compressed audio file recording, to a limited number of wideband levels, we are talking about days, weeks, or even months during which you can record continuously without running out of memory. A question regarding the computer platform. Yeah, the Mac computers, iMac computers, as I mentioned before, you can import the raw data, but the two software solutions that we showed to you, that applies also for the Microsoft Excel templates, do not run under iOS, unfortunately. Yeah, we had to focus ourselves on yeah, the most the largest portion of the market, and that is why we choose the Microsoft. Then I see another question regarding the licensing. For the Data Explorer software, the cost of the licensing and the applicability, I'm not, I don't know the dollar cost, but in euro, it's roughly 800 euro. Please ask your local NTI partner. They will be able to supply this information for you. What is important, again, the license will be installed on the Excel 2 instrument. So the data transfer is limited, is enabled by this license. Secondly, you can install as many Data Explorer software on any PC you like. You can even install the Data Explorer without a license, and then you can run it in a demo mode to get a feeling of that software. Yeah, that is, I think, the most important stuff to be said about licenses. Then I see another question, very good one, and that is regarding the effect when we zoom into a section here it looks as if some new data, a higher resolution, would immediately pop up. And this is not really the case. This is just a graphical result. We are, of course, always considering all the data that have been recorded, but we don't display them in the zoom out mode. You can compare that if you go into Google Maps. You would look onto a country, you would see the contours of the country in the beginning, and the more you go into the details, you will see the villages, you will see the streets, and so on. So this is just a display effect that has nothing to do with the accuracy of the data calculation or the result calculation. Then another question regarding these markers here, whether they are also available under Microsoft Excel. The answer is no. These markers, so the highlighting of events and even the exclusion of events, is only supported in the Data Explorer. It's not available in the Microsoft Excel template. And I see another question regarding the import of older files. So let's say you have apparently you have an Excel 2 and you have already recorded long-term measurements in the past, and maybe you're gonna buy now the Data Explorer next month. So the answer is yes, you can import these old files into the Data Explorer, supposed that these files have been recorded with an Excel 2 which had the firmware version 2.32 or higher. If the Excel 2 meets this requirement, you're absolutely free to import existing files into the Data Explorer at any time. Well, I think that seems to be everything. No more questions. So thank you very much for your attendance. I hope you enjoyed the webinar. I hope it gave you the information you were looking for. And otherwise, please don't hesitate. Send us an email, contact us at any time. And as I said, if you like, you may watch this video once again. As soon as it is public, you will be informed accordingly. Hope to meet you again in the future with our next webinar. So thanks again, and goodbye for today.